Mike P had a video on how to make necklace pendants out of, or on the lathe. So his process, well, first of all, I thought that's really awesome. Now I have a solution for all my little scrap pieces of wood. So basically how this works, you make a little jig. So this is just to cut off a scrap piece of maple plywood that I had, and I used a Forstner bit to drill a 1-inch hole. I put it on my lathe in my truck, or in the chuck, drilled the hole, and then took it on my bandsaw. Well, first I drilled another little hole back here as a relief. Bandsaw made one cut right here, moved it over slightly, and made the cut to finish into that relief hole there. Basically a collet. And then I had some scrap pieces of, this is mahogany, so I made these two sacrificial pieces. So I stuck it on the lathe, made it round, and then made a 1-inch tenon basically to go inside the collet here. And so when you put it in your 4-jaw chuck, it holds down, clamps down on that. After that, I've got all these little scrap pieces of wood I've cut down on my bandsaw, and I use double-sided tape to hold it onto this piece here. So basically that's how that works, and you'll see on this 4-jaw chuck I've taken 2 of the jaws out. Mike Peace in his video, he went a step further and put a piece of aluminum or metal across the top with a stop, two different stops, to preserve the edge here. As you can see, I'm just using the edge of the chuck to dig into the wood as my indexing, so to speak. But basically, I know which pieces, or I know which ones are the center. So I just put that right in there, tighten it slightly to hold it, and then that little guy slides in there, and when I tighten it all the way, that guy's not coming out. And so that's the center point. So what I do is I've already got the double-sided tape on here. That's why I made the little alleyway here, because I am holding these pieces on with double-sided tape in case one flies off. There's a better chance one of y'all is not going to get hit. What I've done with these, they have a lot of saw marks in them, so I've taken 150 or whatever sandpaper, laid it on a flat surface. I'm sure there's a million other ways to do that, but to get those saw marks off so I have more surface area for the tape to adhere. And then it simply just sticks. I've got this, what do you call this guy? Yeah. No, this piece. Live center, that's the word I'm looking for. So I've got that, and I ordered these little silicone pieces. I've got like a big cone that helps with turning vases and whatnot. I forget the guy's name that makes them, but this one works great for this because if I were to take that off, it has the point or the sharp circle.
Is that the Rubber Chucky?
That guy, yeah, Rubber Chucky is the name of the business. And since I'm dealing with thin stock here, I don't really want to jam that point or that circle in there, but I need it to be held on there, at least for the time being. So that's a good way just to give it some pressure while that glue sets up. Or not glue, but the tape. You want it to stick for a minute. Switching gears for a second, our last meeting, there was a discussion on sharpening systems. And I mentioned that I have the Wood Turner Wonders sharpening system. I forget what the whole system's called, but everything from the plywood here up is sold as a set or individually from them. Feel free after the demonstration to come up here and check it out. I brought it in just because there was some interest. It's got different, you can see here A and B, so this part comes forward or backwards. And in combination with these numbers, this piece moves in and out, gives you different grinds. Same thing over here with the platform you've got, you can't see it in the camera, but you've got different angles, and it's even got a slotted bit for these, I guess you'd call them little jigs, for skews to slide back and forth to keep your piece. I've never actually used those. I barely ever use a skew, but they're there. And I've got an 80 grit over here And I had a 180 grit, and I wanted to go a little finer, so I got the 350 grit from Rikon. I want to get the same fatter wheel of 350 for over here, because for bigger gouges, it kind of drops off the side there. I haven't had any issues with it, but it would make me feel a lot better. So to use that, this piece comes out, but it's just like the Wolverine, basically, how it holds in there, and then you have this little piece here to gauge how far to put your bit down the tool. So it's on there now. So depending on what grind I want to do, I position it either forward for B or back for A. It only moves a little bit. And I've got it set on 2. If I move it back to 3 and do it on A or B, it does different bowl bottom grinds, if that makes sense. So I typically do it on B2, which is an Ellsworth grind, is what it says, basically. So the Rikon, the one thing that I don't like about it with this, I've had to kind of rig it, and it's got a slight wobble to it, but I haven't had any issues really. Before I was grinding freehand on a cheap little high-speed lathe or grinder with stone wheels, getting a different grind every single time. So it was kind of like learning to turn again every time I came off the grinder. So that's why I spent the money on this. And as anybody knows, sharp tools makes your life a whole lot easier when it comes to turning. And it also helps that you have the same grind every time. So anyways, that's that. So back to this. So the first thing I'll do is make this piece round. So since I'm holding on with double-sided tape, I'm going to make nice, easy, slow cuts. All right, so I've got it round-ish. Got a little piece there. I'll take a little bit more off. Looks pretty good. Now I trust that the tape is set up enough now. I'm going to pull this back and finish the front. I was really excited to find this little method of doing this because it doesn't take long, and sometimes I struggle where I want to turn. I want to spend time in my shop, but I don't want to dedicate a lot of time to a big piece like that. So I like to feel productive, especially after I get off work. I've got this nice shop that I've always wanted and a big lathe and, you know, all the stuff that I've always wanted, and I feel like I need to use it. So I feel like if I turn something every day, I feel good. You know what I mean? I see a lot of head shaking. So this is a cool little project where I can feel accomplished at the end of the day and have made something. So that looks pretty good. I'll sand it down slightly. And I just brought these discs I bought for my random orbital sander, and I don't like them. So now I'm using them for turning. They're just terrible. If you got to go through the grits on a bunch of stock, you can't. If you take this off of your sander, it bends and warps and all that stuff. So now I'm not using those on my sander anymore. So yeah, they're not great. I don't mind the sheets of them though. If you're using just the sheets, they're pretty good. But nothing beats a good old like paperback. I've just got 180, 220. 320, and I don't think the 180 is appropriate. I'm going to start with 220. Steel mesh, yeah, maybe. Sand net by Diablo. I mean, they work great until you have to take them off and you want to put them back on. I recently was working did a white oak foyer into a new house, and I had to bought rough white oak lumber and had to plane it down and surface everything and then sand through the grits on a ton of wood. And that's when I discovered I didn't like these things. So a little convex, so I'll show you that in a minute, what I'm going to do with that. I discovered an issue when I started turning these, that this one that's in here right now is flat. And then I liked the convex feel of these pendants, so when I turn it around and try to tape it, it's not getting taped very much, if you know what I mean. And I'll show you that right now. So that looks pretty good, or I'll show you that in a minute. So the next step I like to do is drill the hole, which means I've got to turn it off center a little bit. So how that works, remind me the name of this thing, Jacob's Chuck or something like that? Is that right? Can't ever remember all these things. So I got that with, who knows, like a 1/4 inch bit on there. And how this works, like I said, Mike Peace has a stopper on his to where he knows if he pulls it all the way, he gets the same one every time. But I'm just simply going to move it to the next little indent on my piece of plywood here, which will help me turn it off center. So there it is. Now, these little blocks of wood that I've made, the reason I say they're sacrificial is because I'm not paying attention to barely going through this. I'm just drilling all the way through. So eventually these things will have too many holes in them and won't be useful anymore. So I'll just make another one. I've got a friend of mine who makes furniture and stuff like that. He gave me a bunch of mahogany cutoffs that I don't really have that much of a use for otherwise. So this was the first thing that I bought or used. You could use anything else to make these. And just drill a hole through. And this kind of works because now I can see the mahogany coming out, so I know I'm through. So then the next thing that I'll do is, obviously I don't want to leave it like that, so I'll do a tiny little recess, clean that little hole up. Not the prettiest one in the world, but it'll do. So then I'll take a little sandpaper. Any questions so far? Now, let's see here. What's the best way to go about this? That just pops right off. Now, they say that this tape is reusable, but I have a hard time keeping sawdust off of it and all that fun stuff. So I forget, I think this was 15, 20 bucks for the roll, and I think that's pretty worth it just to go. But what I was saying before, this thing is convex. So if I try to stick that on the flat tape like that, there's not a whole lot of grab. So I turned one with a recess in it that allows more surface area and tape to hold on to. So, yeah, I'm trying to think how I've done this in the past. I just started doing this. So that's the one thing I forgot, center finder. Yeah, he said you forgot something. You know you did. So what I'll do is I'll mark the center on the back here. I could also use this and get fairly close. You know, if I stuck that through the hole there and tried to, but then my hole's off, it's not in this one. So I'm just going to try. If I have to get it round again, that's not the worst thing in the world. It won't be much. So I'm going to move this back over to the center. Cool thing about these, what'd you call it again? The rubber chucky, yeah. When you get them, he tells you they're not going to be round, so you can turn them down to whatever you need to. So I've thought about it, maybe ordering some more of these little ones and turning them down a little bit smaller so I can get more meat out of this piece while it's still supported by the tailstock. You can customize them is basically what I'm saying. So it's jumping a little bit. I'll have to make it round again, but that's all right. Still a little wobbly, but for demonstration purposes, I think it'll work. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of possibilities for, you could turn donut-shaped pendants doing the same method. I haven't tried that yet, but it's on my mind. Some of you might be wondering how I'm going to line the holes up.
We just said that.
I heard you. This is where I'll bring this guy back in. And this should just turn that and line it back up. And I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect either, but that's close enough, right? I haven't decided that yet. Open to any advice for any jewelry makers in the room. I was thinking leather, something simple like that. One thing I forgot about when I was discussing this piece, the plywood piece, Mike Peace in his video first made one of these with a solid piece of wood, and then it cracked on him along the grain. So that's why he recommended plywood. Makes a lot of sense, right? All in all, to make this was about 30 minutes, and I started turning those pendants. And that's basically it. I mean, the large hole and the small, this, I think that just an inch. I mean, you can freehand it. I wanted to leave enough meat back here to where it wasn't going to weaken the piece. He might have mentioned in his video the dimensions of this, but I'm guessing this is 4.5, 5 inches, something like that, by 2 inches. And I mean, you don't have to make this hole a 1 inch. You could make it a big one at 2 inches or something like that. I mean, that's dealer, or a ½ inch. Hey, you could go smaller. Dealer's choice on that one. And you don't need a huge gap in these lines here either. Just the kerf of my bandsaw blade is enough to tighten down on this piece here. Anybody with women in their lives, they always like jewelry. And there you have it.